Hi, everyone. Welcome back to All Aboard with Rob Belliveau. I am Rob Belliveau, and today we have a fantastic guest joining us all the way from far, far away, actually not that far away, Western University, Courtney Hanna-Benson. Courtney, how are you today?
Hi, I'm doing great. How are you?
Great. We've chatted about this episode before coming in. Nothing is scripted, but I'm really excited to hear things about your journey with AI, big topic these days. But before we dive into that particular area, why don't you let our listeners know a bit more about who is Courtney, what do you do, and what is your role at Western, and give us some background.
Fantastic. Yeah, absolutely. So I work at Western Center for Teaching and Learning, and there I'm the Associate Director for Digital Learning, which means that I oversee the center's portfolio with all things at the intersection of education and technology. So, for example, our LMS falls under my portfolio, and as does our programming around generative AI. So
Amazing.
it's a space that I'm very firmly in right now.
And for anyone listening, we always try to sometimes go back to the very beginning. LMS is a learning management system. And in particular, folks that have followed our podcast might know what I'm about to say next. But what is that LMS that you use?
Yeah, we are with D2L's Brightspace.
Brightspace, the thread that connects many of us. And that's
Yes.
one of the ways that we met. And that was back at Fusion, Brightspace's annual users conference this summer. What did you think of Fusion? What do you think of that experience going and meeting with other educators and technologists around the world, talking about all things educational technology and Brightspace?
It was a wonderful experience. It was my first time at Fusion. So it was really neat to see kind of how it's structured, the event they put on. I like that they showcase community initiatives. So folks who use Brightspace, how they've kind of structured their sites, let's say, or how they're using analytics behind the scenes to get a little bit deeper dive into some very applicable work. So I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, it's interesting hearing that perspective where we think often that higher education is so disconnected from corporate training or corporate training so disconnected from K-12 systems. But really, there's something I think we can all learn from each other at those conferences, isn't there?
Yeah, absolutely. And so many neat takeaways where you're like, oh, I could totally see that in this situation. And I haven't thought about it like that.
When we think about that and you think about using Brightspace, at Western, and, you look back at your time there, what are a couple tools or areas of Brightspace that have really transformed how your faculty is working with online education?
I think the systematic structure that's inherent in Brightspace has really been tremendous for setting a very predictable structure for our students. So prior to Brightspace, we are relatively new to Brightspace. We migrated all of our academic courses less than 2 years ago. Prior to that, we were in Sakai, which was, if you're unfamiliar, a completely open source platform. So it was very customizable, which made it a very different experience from course to course for our students. So I think that we've made gains in leaps and bounds in terms of creating an accessible, predictable environment from course to course.
Yeah, that you really don't want those learners coming in to a course and spending time just learning how to navigate the course and miss out on getting right to the content that they need to do to learn, right? That's really important.
And doing that every single time for every new course.
and keeping those standards, yeah. But then there's that balance between that and evolution of not being stuck in the way you've done something all the time because that's the way we've done it. How do you look at that framework and say, okay, here's where we're at today, but we're willing to make some changes kind of going forward?
Yeah, I think that having a nice, consistent framework sets the stage for some really transformative things to happen. So maybe you can't approach, let's say, your lesson in the same way you've done it in a completely customized page, but it has you thinking about, well, how could I do this a little bit differently so that I'm accessing kind of all of my learners, I'm not leaving anyone out.
Yeah, that's a great tip. As we look forward, this thing is out there called AI. So we talk about Brightspace platforms, but outside of that ecosystem and starting to be in the ecosystem as well, there's tools around that. How is Western navigating this AI discussion as a learning tool that we believe learners should start to learn about, use, and be part of their journey, versus that tool also potentially being, a fairly large undermining presence in the academic integrity of institutions, and certainly, obviously, Western would be looking at that. How are you balancing that right now?
Definitely. It's certainly a very big conversation that we're having. So there's lots of pockets on campus where folks are talking about AI, how it impacts their research, how it's impacting their teaching and learning, our business processes. Like all of these conversations are happening. From a teaching and learning perspective, you're absolutely right in that generative AI does have the potential to promote some cognitive offloading for our students. So how we've approached it, so Western doesn't have any guiding AI policies that govern use for the entire institution. Instead, under the guidance of our Chief AI Officer, Mark Daly, we have a set of guiding principles. And ultimately, you decide for yourself as an instructor, as an employee at Western, as a student, if using AI is aligning with Western's principles. And then you have also your own set of principles and values and things that you hold dear to you. So are you using Gen AI in alignment with your values?
That's really interesting. Really putting it back to being user-centric framework for decision-making, and putting accountability back to the people that could or should be using it, to apply it how they feel is reasonable given the case. Is that what that balance is looking like?
Yeah. It's kind of dependent on the case, but also dependent on like your willingness to use the tool, knowing that like its origin and the potential like biases that you may be perpetuating by using it as well. So kind of how do you mitigate that? How do you address it? How do you disclose your use? It's all about like the very critical and very responsible use of AI, because ultimately, like it's not a neutral technology by any means. So we need to be very purposeful in the way that we interact with it.
Yeah, I think that's a great lead into the next thing I actually wanted to ask you was, given that balance that Western's put on faculty and learners, what's the most surprising way you've seen from your lens AI being used in Brightspace or the LMS, either from the learner perspective or the education perspective that has improved that learner outcome?
Actually, at Fusion, I saw D2L just launched an AI tutor within the LMS. So, and I think that has the potential to support learners' processes because from my understanding, the tutor model works on a retrieval augmented generation or RAG approach where it only pulls content from the instructor's material and then generates responses based on that, as opposed to kind of these the larger kind of open language models like your generic chat GPT, let's say. So that has the potential to be very applicable in those instances. And on the flip side, for the instructor, you get to see what your students are asking of the AI tutor, and then you can tailor your instruction based on how concepts are landing, how they are making sense of what it is that you are teaching. And it's all sort of like little data points that you can use as an instructor to inform your teaching practices.
Yeah, we often, sometimes it's kind of more talked in general terms like open loop versus closed loop type systems. So having that closed loop helps keep certainly even the intellectual property kind of at bay and keep it relevant and hopefully reduce what some folks call hallucinations in the materials, which is always fun. Shifting kind of away from AI for a sec, as we look at 2025 and we look at different other online trends. So we have AI, obviously, it's a thing and it's here and it's not going anywhere. No. What is there another couple trends in online learning that are you're really excited about? But also, are there a couple that might just kind of keep you up at night, wondering like, oh, are we going to deal with this in a negative way? Is this going to be something that's going to be a problem?
You know what I'm loving, and maybe I'm seeing it because I may exist in my own little echo chamber of really awesome people. But what I am seeing is that folks are returning to their quote unquote pandemic pedagogy. They're looking at their online courses now and thinking, how can I rework these? How can I make them better? How can I really utilize the online space, not as like a pivot away or an alternative to face-to-face instruction, but as a means to promote access to reach a greater audience. So that's what I'm seeing, like a more intentional investment in some spaces in online learning, and that's really exciting to me.
What's keeping you up, though? What keeps you up? What makes you think, oh, what's going on here?
Well, it might be common knowledge right now that higher educations are in like precarious financial situations. So some institutions, like in order to kind of meet the bottom line, might see online instruction as a great way to kind of get more folks enrolled in classes. And it's more driven by profit as opposed to access. So that is keeping me up at night, because I think if we're going to grow our online presence, which I am totally in favor of promoting access to education through online modalities, I think it needs to be very, very intentional in the way it's done.
Yeah. Well, I think that even almost ties into your previous point when we talk about how online learning has evolved. And, we had the COVID disruption, which really forced folks to look at learning management systems more as a primary deliverer tool than lectures and what have you, because of the shift that we had. And now I think what you were just expressing that's exciting is the shift to using the tools to do some of the teaching, to unburden teachers, professors from some of those tasks they used to do in the classroom. But that modality shift that is, potentially that risk that you were just mentioning, could actually, if designed properly, open up for more people to take education.
100%. Yeah, because you're just opening doors that otherwise would have been closed to those people who can't access like your physical lecture. So it can absolutely be an incredible access measure.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's interesting to watch the shifts and watching how higher education is using these tools. And I think it's something that the COVID disruption is still real, but I think people are adapting. And in that vein, early days of COVID, online learning got this real hype. A lot of people had to put material in there very quickly and maybe a little hastily. But the dust is settling now. The dust is settled, I'm pretty sure. And how are learners at Western responding to more and more of their education being shifted into a learning management system? Not supplementary, but complementary to their traditional teaching methods of professors.
Yeah, absolutely. At Western, a lot of our course offerings are in person. Like Western considers itself a residence-based institution. We provide guaranteed residence for first-year students coming in. So a part of that is kind of being on campus with like in the physical campus community. So what's nice about like our use of the LMS is it's really enhancing that face-to-face element of it. So instructors can use the LMS to deliver pre-lecture content, post-lecture content. It's a space for engagement asynchronously to support that synchronous work. So really a number of ways in which we can kind of support the face-to-face modality, in addition to offering other streams of access.
Mm-hmm. How are you measuring that? So, you've got this very inclusive, welcoming campus. First years get access to housing, which is a huge, huge topic. But how do you measure whether these digital learning innovations, we talked just about, the shift of some of the course materials going into a system, are helping students learn better? And it's not just a convenience factor that is, being put out there. How are you doing that?
So true. I think the student voice is very important to capture, to gain to gain an awareness of like what impact it's having on their education. Right now, we're about to embark on a learning strategy that's headed by our Center for Teaching and Learning, where we are going to gather exactly that, is students and faculty perception of teaching and learning at Western's campus. And a big part of that is how technology is supporting their learning.
Interesting. And will that involve also, are there programs or are there supports being put in place for, faculty, for instance, that are looking to use AI more in their courses and in their education, but don't really know where to start? The statistics on AI apps, I can't even recite them right now because I think by the time I say it, there will be 20,000 more of them out there. It's overwhelming. So how are you supporting the faculty on that journey to be more responsive and adaptive to AI, but also making sure that we're not losing the mark on the students, still maintaining those achievements and outcomes?
Yes, definitely. And that is a very deliberate approach we take in our programming. So at the Center for Teaching and Learning, we deliver workshops, resources to support our faculty in their technology enhanced teaching and learning, at least within my portfolio, but teaching and learning more broadly. So with respect to generative AI, our programming is anything from an introduction to Gen AI to playgrounds where we say, come out, come explore Gen AI, play around with it with your peers, ask lots of questions, etc. We also have a monthly community of practice where faculty come together and they share ideas, they learn from each other. We have the Generative AI Challenge, which is now, we're in the fall offering of it, but we have offered it in the summer as well. And that's a really unique offering coming out of our center. It's a series of weekly posts that seeks to unpack those very tangly conversations about AI, but one topic at a time. And
what would be an example of one of those topics? I'm really curious now. Like, you seem excited about that. What are one of those topics? And do you create these topics? Are you involved in the creation of these topics?
Honestly, okay. So the challenge is really neat. And the topics themselves are proposed by what we call the Generative AI Challengers. Those are the authors of the topics. And because generative AI and its impact in education is kind of emergent, it's provided a really good opportunity to leverage and lean on like expertise all over campus, because no one's an expert in this stuff right now. So we have challengers who are faculty members, librarians, students are also challengers. These are, again, the authors of the posts themselves. One challenge in particular that I loved was having to do with creativity. Like generative AI and the act of creation. And it's written by Stephen Sprong, who's Western's copyright officer. So he kicked off the article with a pop culture, like a Simpsons reference, the blurst of times, to frame generative AI as clever, but like not quite creative.
Okay.
Yeah. And then he kind of walked through how these big issues like data use, originality, and cultural stagnation are worries, of course, but that like reproduction and originality have kind of always coexisted. So it was a really interesting take on something that has a pop culture reference. He wove that in, and it was a really wonderful piece. It was one of my favorites for sure.
I feel like The Simpsons have been like prescriptive of time for a lot of things. They're Nostradamus in our current world. It's crazy.
There's a Simpsons reference for anything.
I think so. I wonder if the Simpsons have us on it somewhere.
Right?
But so this challenge, it almost makes me think of those like the earlier days of hackathons, but it's really kind of just in an AI focused kind of realm. So people are pushing the envelope. They're bringing up these ideas. They're providing challenges to each other, both from the faculty perspective, the learner perspective, and we know that there are efficiencies in AI that are definitely helping us automate things, whether it's part of the learning journey or part of the creation of material. Do you have any? Have you had any feedback or outputs from either those challenges or observations you've had of like these are one or two areas that we definitely need to keep moving the button and moving the dial on AI being part of, or a couple that like we should really not let AI creep into that area, that this should just remain very human focused, high level detailed touch from a behavioral or kind of a competency standpoint of an educator?
Such a big question.
I know,
right?
I know. That's why you're here, though. You're going to help us all out. We're going to figure this out.
We're going to solve all the problems today. It's such a big question of like, where does AI fit in the framework of higher education? And like, while that is a question, what we're striving to ask instead of folks is like, where can humans fit in higher education? Because as we like innovate and continue to move forward and push with these developments in AI, we take from our perspective in our programming is that humans always need to be the center of this conversation. How do we leverage AI to support humans flourishing? So what AI innovation might look like for one discipline, it could look very different in another discipline. And I think that there needs to be space, especially in higher education, for resistance to adopt the technology. There needs to be space for some preservation of disciplinary norms and kind of respecting that as we kind of push towards this idea of constantly transforming.
Yeah, if it's not broke, why fix it kind of thing. There are things that are working very well and very sound in the educational models that don't currently have AI as the core influencer, as I think what I'm hearing you say there.
It's a little bit of that, but also like there's this was expressed once to me by one of our anthropology scholars and faculty members. Her name is Trish Markert. In anthropology, she said, and I quote, "Writing is innovation." So like in that discipline, they don't want their students offloading their writing to generative AI because that is innovation within the discipline of anthropology. Whereas perhaps in the faculty of science, and this might not be true, but you could argue that communication, like writing up a report in science, is a measure of communicating your work outwards, like your scientific discoveries outwards. And maybe the communication piece, that text generated there, could be offloaded to AI. So it's really, really discipline specific in terms of how you want to approach integrating Gen AI.
Super fine balance. And I think, organizations, whether it's higher education or even businesses right now, are tackling that same question of what are some tasks that this can make our lives super easier, give us back time to do other more, brain intense exercises. It's such a very delicate balance. It's interesting. I'll be curious to hear more on this. We're going to have to follow up on this in another episode down the road to see how some of these challenges are still shaping your educational programs.
Absolutely. It's an ongoing conversation. So we could have completely different conversations like 2 months from now.
I know. If you're at your desk today and you're doing some work in any of these topics that we just talked about today, we always like to leave educators or people listening to the podcast with like a couple takeaways. What are the one or two kind of tools that are in your toolbox right now that you find really helpful in the work that you do?
I think the reflection piece, like reflection as a tool, is something that I think needs space. So if I could make any suggestion to anyone listening, let's say, it's to really look at whatever it is you're wanting to use AI for, or whatever it is you're trying to do in your classroom, and really take the time and sit with it and think, what are my goals? What do I value? And then your next steps should be in alignment with those things. You should be designing assessments that align with the learning goals that you've set out for your course. You should be using generative AI in a way that aligns with your values. So really like emphasizing the need to pause and reflect before you take the next step.
Do you use AI to do that reflection? Because I know some people do this. They put it in and ask, whether it's ChatGPT or Claude or some of those ones, put that reflection in there and just have a discussion with it. Have you ever done that?
I have done that. Yeah, absolutely. But AI is sycophantic. Like it will tell me whatever I want to hear. It will say I'm a genius. So I absolutely do use it when I feel like I need a little ego boost, but I in no means trust it to give me an unbiased answer.
Well, that's a great takeaway. I do like asking it sometimes if I was thinking something, is this on the right track according to industry or according to a standard? And sometimes it gives me some pretty good constructive feedback. So
for sure, yeah,
awesome. Courtney, this has been really fun. I feel there's like 8 other areas we could explore, and we should, and we will, listeners, we will. Thanks for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. This was a lot of fun. The time just flew by. Oh my goodness.
I know. If anyone out there wants to get a hold of Courtney, you can definitely email us at allaboard@neontrain.com and we can put you in connection. And if you have any other thoughts or feedback on today's episode, feel free to drop us an email. And until next time, thanks for joining.